Hello, my name is John Holland. I'm a student success advisor with ICANN, and I want to thank you for joining me in watching this pre-recorded presentation on paying for college. Now, I know that paying for college and the financial aid process can be kind of an intimidating process, so hopefully you can get some good information by watching this webinar. So before I get started, I do want to mention that there are some materials that kind of go along with this presentation. It's not that you have to have the materials to watch this. However, I do refer a little bit later to that sheet that you'll see on your left that says ready to file the FAFSA. So notice the website across the top. It tells you where you can find these materials and download them and print them out if you'd like to. There is a how to pay for college guide. Now, every once in a while throughout the presentation, you'll see a page number in the upper right-hand corner, and that's referring to this How to Pay for College guide. Now, it's not that you have to follow along by any means, but it just tells you where to find that information that I happen to be talking about. Now, the other sheet that's on your left says ready to file the FAFSA, here's what you'll need. And I think on our website, we call it what to bring to an appointment if you would have a FAFSA appointment. But on the first page, it shows you all the different types of documentation that you might need in order to apply for financial aid. Now, there is a second page, and that has some definitions of what I would call are some of the more trickier areas that are found on the financial aid application. Now, I also want to mention our website. The address is icansucceed.org. Lots of good information on our website. You'll notice across the top, that's where you can find the topics that you can find more information about, such as career planning, college planning, obviously financial aid. Towards the middle there, you'll see where it says events and presentations, and that's where you might have found this recording. Actually, we have recordings of presentations as well as upcoming events that we have scheduled. On the left, you'll notice it says schedule an appointment. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now down towards the lower left, it says quick links. And if I were to have that extended out on a live website, that's where you would find that material zone that I mentioned in the previous slide. That's where you can go in and download information, things that we might not even hand out in presentations, by the way, such as campus visit questions. You'll find a link to our scholarship zone or our scholarship database of different scholarships that we put together that students and parents can kind of browse through, and hopefully the student eventually maybe can apply for some of those scholarships. So please be sure to check out our website at icansucceed.org. So we do have several locations across the state. I'm only showing mine. Mine is in Cedar Falls. It's on the University of Northern Iowa campus. And then we also offer virtual appointments. So we do require appointments for whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. You can schedule an appointment for help by calling our toll-free number, 877-272-4692, or you can also go to our website and click on schedule an appointment. We'd be happy to help you out. Again, everything that we do at ICANN is for free. So we'll go ahead and get into the presentation. I always like at the beginning to explain a little bit about what financial aid is, and maybe at the same time tell you a little bit about what financial aid isn't. We'll talk about how a student applies for financial aid. We'll talk a little bit about where the money comes from or what kinds of funding sources are out there. I'll talk a little bit about scholarships, and lastly, I'll remind you of the free places you can go to for help as you go through the process. So in a nutshell, this is what financial aid is. So financial aid is made up of two different types. There's what I call the good stuff. That's the gift financial aid. That's the type of financial aid that neither the student nor the parent would have to pay back. Now, that gift financial aid is in the form of grants and scholarships. Some of those grants and scholarships could be based on need, and that's what this application we're going to talk about today helps to determine, or it could be based on some special talent the student has, whether it's their grade point average, their ACT score, their class rank, the fact they wrote a really good essay and turned it into the local 4-H club or Kiwanis club, something like that. Then you also have what we call self-help financial aid. And self-help financial aid is broken into two different kinds. There's what we call student employment or work study, and that's where a college can set aside some money and the student has the opportunity to earn that money, usually by working 10 to 20 hours a week or so, usually on campus, but not always. And they would actually get a paycheck based on the hours that they work. And then there's loans. And loans could be in the student's name to then be paid back, or in the parent's name for the student to then be paid back. So, like I said, in a nutshell, this is what financial aid is. Now, financial aid is not necessarily there to pay for all of a student's education. Now, sometimes it might do that, probably not often enough, it seems like, because unfortunately, usually what we hear about is tuition kind of going up and up and up, and we tend to hear about grant programs kind of staying down here. But you should try not to think of financial aid as a way to pay for all of a student's education, but it's to be out there as a supplement to hopefully supplement what the family has in the form of their income and their assets to help them offset the cost of education. Now, the other thing I'll mention is that sometimes people comment and they say, well, my son or daughter didn't get any financial aid, they were only offered student loans. Well, even though loans, whether it's in the student's name or the parent's name, eventually have to be paid back, I do want to let you know that loans are considered to be a type of financial aid. So this application I've somewhat alluded to here a couple times already is what we call the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Now that's the most important application that students would need to complete to be considered for most kinds of financial aid. When a student fills out this application, what it tries to show the Department of Education is kind of a snapshot of what the family's financial situation is. And that's used in determining what the student's eligibility is for financial aid. Now, sometimes people say, they say, well, I've heard a lot about that FAFSA thing. I heard it's a pain. We're probably not going to qualify for much anyway because our neighbors filled it out last year and they didn't get much, and we're about in the same boat. So I don't think we'll mess with it. Maybe we'll just look at loans, something like that. Well, in my opinion, every student should go ahead and fill out this free application for federal student aid. It doesn't cost anything to apply, and where a student might not qualify for much aid at one college, they might qualify for more at another. When a student fills out this application, they automatically apply for federal grants. They automatically apply for most state grants, and it tells what their eligibility is for student loans. Some college might require the application for their institutional aid, and a few private scholarships might even require the results. So is it an out and out requirement that every student fill it out? No, it's not. However, again, I suggest that every student fill it out. Now, I do want to mention that while this application in and of itself is not a loan application, in order for a student or a parent to access educational loans, they have to fill out this application first. So again, that's why I suggest that students go ahead and apply. So let's talk a little bit about how a student would actually go ahead and apply for financial aid. The way that they would apply is they go to this Department of Education website. The website address is studentaid.gov. You would go to that website, you would complete the application, and it's usually processed within about 3 to 5 days. When a student applies through this application, the application has what we call skip logic. So they ask the student certain questions. Depending on how they answer those questions, then it might not show questions later on. It skips them. So again, when you go to apply for financial aid, the website is what I'm showing here. It's studentaid.gov. Now let's talk a little bit about when a student should actually complete this application. Notice it says that it's available fall of the student's senior year. So I do want to mention that if the student is planning on filling out this application for the 25-26 academic year, then that application will not become available until December 1st of 2024. So if it's a high school senior and they want to apply for financial aid for next fall, spring, it would not be available till December 1st of 2024. Now, the next year, we're hoping that it goes back to when it usually becomes available. That's October 1st. But again, it would be December 1st for a high school student graduating in the spring of 2025. Now, the important thing to remember in applying for financial aid is that some financial aid can run out. It's kind of what they call first come, first serve. But that doesn't mean that every student has to fill it out on that first day, which is December 1st. You could if you wanted to. But what it means is that ideally the student would know what the college or the colleges they're looking at going to, what their priority application date is, and make sure that they fill out the application before that date. Now, the earliest dates in the state of Iowa happen to be right around the 1st of February, and then they tend to be a little bit later after that. By the way, in our booklet, you'll notice that we have listed priority application dates. Some of those have stayed the same. Some of them might have changed a little bit because the date to file has changed. So check with the college or university to find out for sure. So my suggestion to a student would be that they fill it out in December or January of 2024 and then 2025 if they're planning on going to college the 25-26 academic year. They will ask about the students and parents 2023 tax information. So most people would have that completed by then. And also, the earlier you apply, the earlier that a college might come back and let the student know what they qualify for. So I would suggest that that's when you would fill out this application. Now, a few hints, I guess, for filling this form out. Most of you will probably be able to click a button and your tax information will automatically get downloaded into the application. However, it does help to have your tax information in front of you when you apply for financial aid. And we'll talk about the reasons for that in just a moment. Sometimes it doesn't download everything. Sometimes they ask a few more questions. I would suggest that when you apply for aid, you read the directions carefully. Most of the questions are pretty straightforward, but some of them could use a little bit of, I guess, defining. And hopefully today I will kind of address some of those more, what I would call trickier questions. There's never any foolish questions on this financial aid application, so please feel free to reach out to ICANN if you do have questions. And when a student applies, they can list multiple colleges. So it's not just for one college. They could list actually up to 20 colleges on this application if they want to. And it means those colleges will go ahead and get this information electronically. Now, the other thing I'll mention is that this financial aid application is not a one-shot deal for 2 years or 4 years that a student goes to college. A student needs to apply every year that they want to be considered for financial aid. So again, the website that a student would go to is studentaid.gov. It's a Department of Education website. Now, this application has changed a little bit in the last year or two. It's now what we call a role-based form. So ideally, what would happen is a student would log in with their studentaid.gov account, and we'll talk about that account here in just a few minutes. But the student would log in, they would answer their questions, then they log out, and then the parent would log in, answer their questions, and then hit sign and submit, and all the parts of the application come together and get submitted. So it's a student role and then usually a parent role as well. So once you complete both of those sections, they come together and the application gets submitted. Now, the application asks several questions of the student to determine if a parent's information is used on the rest of the application. And these are what we call the dependency questions, and we have those summarized on that sheet that I mentioned earlier. But remember, they're asking these questions of the student. And this is for a student filling out the 25-26 financial aid application. So if you're watching this in fall of 2024 or spring of 2025 and you're a high school senior, these questions are to you. So if a student could answer yes to one or more of these questions, then the parent's information is not used on the rest of the application. So they ask the student in so many words, will you be turning 24 this next year? Are you married? Are you working on your master's degree this next year? Or are you currently serving on active duty? Or are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Now, most every high school senior would probably have to answer no to all these questions. So I'm going to show you another list of questions that they have to go through. So remember, these are asked of the student again, and they ask the student, do you have any children that will receive more than half their support from you for this next year? And any time since you turned age 13, were both your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Or were you a ward of the court? Are you or were you in a legal guardianship? And then there's a few questions about homelessness. So again, if a student could answer yes to any one of these questions, then their parents' information is not used. Now, notice that top question where it asks about children or dependents. They don't just say, do you have any children? They say, do you have any children or dependents who will receive more than half their support from you for this next year? Now, most high school seniors, not all, but most high school seniors probably have to answer no to these questions. So then the application goes on to ask about parents' information. So let me back up just a moment. I want to remind you that with these questions, it doesn't matter who claims a student on the tax return. It doesn't ask the student, did you move out of your parents' house 6 months ago, or are you going to move out of your parents' house 6 months from now? It's strictly these questions that determine if the parent's information is used. Now, once it's determined that a parent's information has to be used, then the application goes on to define who is considered to be a parent. Now, notice they now use the word contributor also. So the Department of Education now uses the word parent/contributor for the parent's information. And by the way, that doesn't mean that you have to contribute money. It means that you are contributing information to the financial aid application so the student can be considered for financial aid. Now, if the legal parents are married, then it's pretty straightforward. That's whose information goes on the rest of the application. Now, if the legal parents are unmarried, but they live together, both their information goes on the financial aid application. And you can see if the parent is widowed or single, they would answer questions about that parent. But if the widowed parent is remarried as of the day you're filling out the application, it would be that parent plus the step parent. Now, it does get a little bit tricky sometimes if there's been a divorce or a separation situation. So the directions tell the student that if the parents are divorced or separated, then the student is required to answer questions or to provide information about the parent that has provided the most financial support during the last year. Now, then it goes on to say, though, as once that's determined, as of today, is that parent remarried? And if so, that parent plus their current spouse's information is used. It does not matter what a divorce decree says. It does not matter who claims a student on the taxes. It's strictly who provided most of the financial support during the last year. And then once that's determined, if that parent is remarried, that parent plus the current spouse's information is used. Now, if that parent is not remarried, it would just be that parent's information that goes on the rest of the application. Now, when a student applies for financial aid, they have to access the form with what we call a studentaid.gov account. And this is just a username and a password that the student would create. And notice it says everyone will need an account to access the form. And we'll talk about the definition of everyone on the next slide. Now, it's important that a student create their studentaid.gov account and the parent or parents whose information would be used on the FAFSA that they create their account before the student applies for financial aid. In years past, a student could fill out or create their studentaid.gov account, their username and password, and they could start filling out a FAFSA immediately. You can't do that any longer. It takes about 3 to 5 days or so for the Department of Education to verify or confirm their information that they're using on the studentaid.gov account. My suggestion would be to create these studentaid.gov accounts well before you apply for financial aid, at least a week before, but it doesn't hurt to do it a month before or so. So the other thing I'll mention is that if a parent does not have a Social Security number, they would be able to create a studentaid.gov account as well. And that's something relatively new. But you would just go to studentaid.gov. That's the same website that a student would go to apply for financial aid, and you would click on create an account. Now let's talk about who needs a studentaid.gov account. So notice on the left it says the student. All students must create a studentaid.gov account. It used to be called the FSA ID. Now only one parent would need to create a studentaid.gov account if the student has two married parents who filed a joint tax return, or if it's a single parent. Now, if the parents did not file jointly in 2023, then each parent would need a studentaid.gov account. So let's say, for example, that the student's parents are divorced and they find out that the mother in this example is the one that provided most of the support. But now, today, the mother is remarried, but she didn't file jointly with her current spouse in 2023. So then the mother and her current spouse would each need a studentaid.gov account when the student applies for financial aid. And the reason for that is these accounts are used in downloading the tax information into the financial aid application. So kind of the way to summarize this is you follow the taxes. So if the parents filed jointly, then only one parent would need a studentaid.gov account. If the parents did not file jointly, then two parents would need a studentaid.gov account. If it's a single parent, obviously only that parent would need the studentaid.gov account. So it gets a little confusing, but if you ever have questions, give us a call. We'd be happy to talk you through it and kind of help you determine whose information goes on the application. I will mention also that if the parent already has a studentaid.gov account, maybe they filled out a financial aid application a few years ago for another student, maybe they filled one out for themselves, or maybe the parent owes student loans, then their studentaid.gov account stays the same. So they wouldn't need to create another one, they would just use the one that they already have. So when the student goes into their section and completes the student section, then the student will be inviting the parents to the FAFSA form. So this is what it looks like, how they do that. Notice they're inviting two parents on here. My suggestion to you would be that the student only invite the parents who have a studentaid.gov account. So if only one parent needed an account, then I would just invite one parent to the FAFSA. The important thing here is be sure to enter the information when you invite that parent exactly as it appears on their studentaid.gov account. The same social security number, date of birth, the spelling of the name. Accuracy is very important on these studentaid.gov accounts as well as when the student invites the parents. Now, when you go through the application, both the student and the contributors must provide consent to the Department of Education to have their tax information downloaded into the application and looked at in determining what the student's eligibility is. And providing consent is really just a matter of clicking a button in the lower right-hand corner. There's lots of information that you would read, but basically it just says that you're providing consent and approval for the Department of Ed to access that information to determine the student's eligibility. If a parent or a student does not provide consent, then the student will not be eligible for financial aid. So you would obviously want to provide consent when you're filling out the form. Now, this is the reason that you'll want to be sure to have your tax information available when you're filling out the application. Most of you, when you provide consent, your tax information will automatically get downloaded right into the application and you won't even see it. It's just in the background. But sometimes they might ask a couple more questions based on your tax information. For example, they will probably ask, did you receive earned income credit in the last 2 years? And most people don't know that off the top of their head, but it would be on your taxes. So that's why is one of the reasons why it helps to have your tax information in front of you. Also, they're going to download your household size from the number of exemptions on your tax return. So if that's changed, you'll have the opportunity to list that on this application. Now, some other questions they may ask would be the parent's assets. Now, I say may ask because remember at the beginning I talked a little bit about skip logic, how this application will ask certain questions. Depending on your answers, they may or may not ask more questions. So depending on your tax situation, they may or may not ask these questions that I'm showing you on the screen. If they do, they'll ask about any child support received in the last complete calendar year. And if that applies to you, you would put in the dollar amount. And then they'll ask about parents' assets. So the first question they ask is, as of today, how much do you have for cash savings and checking? And that is what it is, cash savings and checking. You put the amount in. The next question they ask about the net worth of a business or investment farm. And then after that, they ask about the current net worth of investments. I'm going to jump down to the bottom question first, where they ask about the net worth of investments. So when they ask that question, they're saying, as of today, the day you're filling out the application, how much do you have for what is the net worth, I should say, of investments, including real estate, but not the home? Now, when I explain this, I like to tell you first what is not to be included as an investment. So when they're asking about the net worth of your investments, you do not include the value of the home that you live in. You do not include the value of life insurance policies that you might own. You do not include the value of any retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, annuities, pensions. You do not include any of those retirement accounts. You would also not include IPERs, as listed on here, or TI-CREF, and also you don't include the value of cars or boats, things like that. So what is to be included as an investment? Well, if you own any other stocks, bonds, CDs, mutual funds, money market funds, trust funds, again, that are not in retirement. If you own a second home or other real estate, that would be included. They want the net worth of that, which would be the value minus any debt. If you as a parent own a 529 plan for the student that's applying for aid, that would be included as an investment. Now, in previous years, if you owned other 529 plans for other children, for example, those would also have been to those would have also had to have been included. However, now you do not include any other 529 plans that you might own unless it's for this student that's applying for aid. And if you don't own any of these things, you would just put a zero in. But if you do, you put in the appropriate amount. Now I'm going to go back to that middle question where it asks about the net worth of a business or investment farm. Now, in previous years, prior to last year, the Department of Education had exclusions for certain kinds of farms or businesses. Now, though, if you own a business or you own a farm, whether it's a family farm that you live on and operate, whether it's farmland 80 acres down the road that somebody else farms for you, regardless of the type of business or what your share of the business is, you do have to list your share of the net worth of the business or the farm. So if it's a farm, you would need to know what is the net worth. So if I were to sell that farm today, what is the value of all the assets of the farm? Crops, land, buildings, machinery, livestock, farm accounts, minus any debt that pertains on the farm. And again, it would be your share. If you own a business, it would be the net worth of any of the assets of the business, such as inventory, buildings, machinery, vehicles, um, those kinds of things, minus any debt. And again, it would be your share if you don't own the whole thing. And it's kind of a judgment call, as to what the value would be. I've helped a lot of people that farm over the years, and they tell me that there's a balance sheet that they might have, that they show a lender at the end of the year to show what their assets are. That might be able to help you. What I suggest to people is that you don't list necessarily what you'd like to get for it, but realistically, what would you get for it if you were to sell it today, minus any debt that's on that farm or business. Now, what the Department of Education does is they ask all these questions. They run it through a formula and they come up with a number called the SAI, or the Student Aid Index. Now, this number helps to determine what the student's eligibility is for financial aid at the various colleges they might be attending. Now, sometimes a scholarship application might request this number as well. It used to be called something called the Expected Family Contribution, or EFC. Now it's called the Student Aid Index. Now, if you're curious as to what the results might look like for you, there are estimators out there. This is one that's on the studentaid.gov website. Remember, that's the website you go to apply for financial aid, and they do have an estimator where they ask maybe, I think it's 10 questions or so, and it kind of gives you an idea as far as what to expect when you actually go through the financial aid process. Now, as we went through this application, I didn't talk about every question, but I want to remind you that they don't ask you questions like, are you going to earn less money in 2024 than you did in 2023? Do you have a lot of medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance? Are you going to work less overtime this year? So those are things they don't ask about in this application. So if you have something like that occurring in your family, where you feel this snapshot they took of your family financial situation isn't really an accurate one, you might have what we call a special circumstance. So what you do is you still fill out the application just like it asks, you have to. Once you get the results back though, that's when you could talk to the college or colleges. You have to talk to each specific college the student is looking at. And you might say something like, well, I know I had to list my 2023 income on this application. However, it turns out in 2024, our income is going to be reduced by $20,000, for example. So sometimes a college will take a look at your situation and maybe make a change, which would increase the student's eligibility. It varies from college to college, and it also varies depending on what your circumstance is. Sometimes maybe it wasn't enough to make any difference in the results, but again, you have to bring this up if this is occurring in your household. You need to talk to the college and explain the situation, and they'll kind of guide you through it. And by the way, when I say that things might have changed and it caused a special circumstance, at any time throughout the student's college career, don't be afraid to talk to the financial aid office. For example, let's say you fill this form out in December of 2024 and the student ends up going to college fall of 2025, and then something happens, maybe a medical issue or a loss of income. Don't be afraid to talk to the college, and maybe they can make a change, which could possibly increase the student's eligibility. So eventually, the student or the college will get this information and they're going to send the student what we call a financial aid offer. And these financial aid offers will tell the student, if you come to our college, here's how much our cost is that we think it's going to cost you to live and go to school for a year. And here are the specific dollar amounts in these specific programs we're going to offer you to offset the cost. So I use the word send. Sometimes a college might actually send it in the mail, but I think more often than not, a college will send an email to the student to their college email account, and it will say something like, check your student portal on our website. Your financial aid offer is available for you to review. So to the student, make sure you're checking those college emails. Once you get admitted to a college, you'll have a college email account. That's how the college is going to communicate with you. And that'll go on while you're in college as well. Um, when could you expect these offers? Well, if you apply in December or January, maybe the colleges come back and ask a few questions. You might expect these financial aid offers. The earliest ones I would guess would probably be sometime in February. More realistically, probably March, maybe even into April or a little bit beyond. But again, when you get these financial aid offers, that's when you can really make an informed decision. Now, when a student applies for admissions, which would usually be about fall of their senior year, a college could come back and with a letter, and hopefully this is the kind of letter the student gets where they say something like, yes, we'd love to have you be a student on our campus. And based on your admission application, you qualify for a college grant of a certain dollar amount. That's not the financial aid offer. That's a college grant or scholarship based on their admission application. The financial aid offer would be based on the results of a financial aid application. So I do have an example of a financial aid offer showing here, and there's also an example or two in the booklet that you have if you downloaded the booklet. Um, and every financial aid offer can look just a little bit different, just to let you know. But on this one, they have the cost of attendance at the top. Now, notice the cost of attendance is broken up into two different kinds. There's the direct costs and the indirect costs. So the direct costs would be costs that go directly to the college or university, such as tuition and fees, and then housing and food if the student lives on campus. Then we have indirect costs on your upper right, where these would include estimated amounts for books, transportation, clothing, maybe a pizza now and then. And these are estimated, so it can vary from student to student. I would suggest that if you're comparing colleges, you focus on the direct costs, because the indirect costs, again, would vary from college to college. They're usually around $4,000 or $5,000. And those are things that maybe the student and the parents could come up with through part-time employment or things like that. So in this example, notice the direct costs are 23,000. The indirect costs are 4,100. So if we add those two together, we come up with 27,100. Now, if you direct your eyes down to the bottom middle of the screen, that's where you'll see that it says total award $27,100. So at a quick glance, someone might say, well, the cost is 27,100. They're awarding 27,100. That's great. It's a full ride. That's great. They're paying for everything. Well, you need to look a little bit more closely at the types of aid in between. And that's where you'll see on this example that they're offering the student about $9,000 in grants and scholarships. Remember, that's the good stuff, the stuff the student doesn't have to pay back. Then they're offering 16,000, a little over $16,000 in loans, and then $2,000 in work study where the student can earn that money. So when you get these financial aid offers, you kind of need to look at what's it really going to cost us out of pocket to go to these different colleges? So include loans, by the way, as out of pocket. So let's look at another example. Here's an example where I've got two colleges, College A and College B. The direct cost, tuition, room and board at College A is $43,900. That's somewhat along the lines of a private liberal arts college. College B, the direct costs are $23,000. That's an example of probably a 4-year public university. College A, they're offering $27,200 in that good stuff, the scholarships and grants. College B, they're offering $63.50 in the scholarships and grants. We subtract that out from the direct costs, and if this student were to go to College A, they would need to come up with $16.7 out of pocket. If they were to go to College B, they need to come up with almost $16.7 out of pocket. So notice that even though the costs are very different in this example, once the college offers financial aid, then you look at, okay, what's it really going to cost me out of pocket? How do I come up with that cost? Now, in the booklet, that's where we have the yearly tuition and fees at all the colleges and universities in the state of Iowa. And you would see that they vary quite a bit. And I know it would be easy, especially for a parent, to look at those costs and automatically start checking ones off that say, we can't afford this one, this one's out, this one's out, this one's out. Anyone greater than 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35,000, there's just no way. But as difficult as it is, and I know it's difficult, especially for a parent, please don't automatically exclude a college based on what I call that sticker price. But eventually you want to look at what I'm showing you right here, and that's cost versus financial aid. Because you might find that some of these more expensive colleges might have more institutional money they can offer from their own pocket to offset that cost. So that's kind of how this financial aid stuff all works. And in my mind, that's when it's decision time. Now, hopefully money's not the only thing determining where a student's going to go, but it's obviously a very important factor. But when you get these financial aid offers and you start to compare them, that's when you can really make an informed decision. Maybe you get 3 financial aid offers, A, B, and C. Maybe the student really wants to go to college A, for example, but maybe college A isn't offering enough financial aid. Maybe we can't afford that. Maybe we look at college B. Work to pay the balance. If a student works 10, 15, 20 hours a week while they go to college, they might bring home $500 to $1,000, for example, $500 to $1,000 to help offset some of those educational costs. Most colleges have what we call monthly payment plans, so you don't have to come up with it all at once at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of each semester. You can spread it out month by month, and then there's loans. So notice that I have loans at the bottom. So in my mind, when I talk about financial aid, I like to think of all the other options before we just automatically jump in and start borrowing student loans. So I'm not going to read this slide to you, but I just want you all to know how important I think it is that students and parents have conversations about what the expectations are when a student goes to college, because sometimes I think there might be a disconnect. Maybe a student might think, well, why should I really worry about it? My parents will pay for everything. What's the big deal? Whereas a parent might think, well, my son or daughter, they get excellent grades. They're involved in all kinds of activities. They do volunteer hours, they get good test scores. I'm sure they're just going to get a ton of scholarships, and that's how we'll pay for college. And I truly hope that's how it works out, but sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. So do have these conversations, students with your parents and parents with your students. I don't think it's too early to start talking about it. I'm sure my daughters would have told you we talked about it way too early at our house, but that was just the way it was. So let's talk about the different kinds of financial aid that a person might see on a financial aid offer. We talked about this at the beginning. There's the gift financial aid, the grants and scholarships, and then there's the self-help financial aid in the form of work study and loans. These are the 4 funding sources. There's the federal and state government, there's the college or university the student goes to, and there's private sources of aid. So with that one free application, the student automatically applied for federal grants. They automatically applied for most state grants. Some colleges want to see the results, and a few private sources might want to see the results as well. That's why that one application is such an important application. So I don't go into a lot of detail on the specific programs found within these sources. There's good information in your booklets. Um, and the other reason I don't go into a lot of detail is it's pretty well automatic. If you fill out a FAFSA and you qualify for the Pell Grant, the college will award it to you. If you qualify for a Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant or FSEOG, and the college has enough funding, they'll award it to the student. So, so that's why I don't go into a lot of detail. I don't make a lot of guarantees. I don't make any guarantees when it comes to financial aid, but I can almost guarantee that most students will be offered a student loan on those financial aid offers. This is the loan they'll be offered. It's called a Stafford loan or a direct loan, and it's broken up into two different types. There's a subsidized and an unsubsidized. So the student will either be offered both of these loans or they'll be offered the one on your right, which is the unsubsidized. If a student shows financial need based on the FAFSA, the government will subsidize some of the loan. That means they'll pay the interest while the student's in college. If the student does not show need, the student can still take a loan out, but it's unsubsidized. That means that the interest starts accruing right away. Now, repayment on both of these loans does not begin until 6 months after the student graduates or drops below half time. Now, notice that interest rate, that's for students attending college the, the 2024-2025 academic year. It changes every July 1st. We don't know what it's going to be for the next fall, spring. This is a loan in the student's name. There's no credit check, there's no cosigner. It's all in the student's name. Very easy to borrow. This will probably be the easiest loan that a student will ever be offered in their lifetime, but not necessarily so easy to pay back. Notice these federal limits. These are federal maximums, 5,500 the first year, and then it goes up a little bit every year after that. No matter what the cost of the college, these are the maximums that students can borrow. Now, maybe the student doesn't need to borrow the maximum that they're offered. You don't have to. You can tell the college, here's how much I'd like to borrow up to these maximums. So we suggest that a student borrow what they need if they're going to borrow, not necessarily what they can, because again, they're easy to borrow, but not necessarily so easy to pay back. There's lots of words on this slide, but basically it hopefully suggests to the student that they borrow only what they need. So students should not borrow more than what their first year starting salary is going to be once they graduate from college, given what their expected employment will be. In the middle example, student borrowed $40,000. That's how much they were planning on earning, hopefully, when they graduated from college. If they borrowed 40,000, their monthly payments would be about $400 a month, and that doesn't go on for 2 years or 4 years or 5 years. It begins 6 months after they graduate and it goes on for 10 years. And they won't pay back 40,000. They would probably pay back closer to 45 to 50,000 depending on the interest rate. So again, loans are there if you need them, but if you can keep that debt down, that would be great. Some people might say, well, $400 a month, that's not that big a deal. But if you think about it, about the time that a student graduates from college, they might want to buy a car, for example, or they might want to buy a house or relocate. They might want to start a family. All those things cost money. Can they really afford $400 a month every month for the next 10 years? Now, there are some tools that students can use. Notice I have them on your screen. There's a game plan and there's something called the return on college investment tool, and that will help students really look at what the cost of college is, how much can they afford to borrow, and maybe do they really need to borrow as they go through college. Now, parents, you might also be offered a loan on these financial aid offers. You might be offered something called a PLUS loan. Now, this is a loan that's in the parent's name for the student. Notice the interest rate's a little higher. There's some higher fees, up to 4% right off the top. And the parents can actually borrow the full cost of attendance minus any financial aid at the college. So this is one option as far as another loan on top of the Stafford loan. I've worked with a lot of families over the years, and a lot of families have told me, well, we borrowed the PLUS loan because we knew that was our only option. I want to let you know that that's not necessarily your only option. There are private loans out there or alternative loans. These loans could be in a parent's name for the student, or they could be in a student's name, usually with a credit-worthy cosigner. Notice the interest rates vary quite a bit. Those are fixed interest rates. Um, they vary quite a bit. There could be also a variable interest rate. Usually, a lot of times, there's no upfront fees, and the student or the parents can decide when they want to start making payments on these loans. So, again, the idea is to keep loan debt down, but I just want you to know that you do have some options out there as far as borrowing. With the state of Iowa, they also offer financial aid, and the ones that I'm showing you on the screen only require the FAFSA. So when you fill out the FAFSA, you automatically apply for these different kinds of state of Iowa financial aid. Some of these are for students going to a community college. Some of these might be for students going to a private college, for example. But again, you fill out the FAFSA, and then depending on your situation, you automatically applied for these. Now notice you can get more information about State of Iowa financial aid through our website that I have listed there. Now, if any of these things pertain to the student, you'll also want to fill out something called the State of Iowa financial aid application. So you would need to fill out the FAFSA and the Iowa financial aid application. And again, you can access that through our website that we have the link listed down below. Not every State of Iowa resident has to fill out this, but it doesn't hurt to fill it out. But there are some additional types of financial aid, especially if you fall into these different categories that I have listed. Now, institutional aid is money that comes directly from the college or university. Now, you can see that some of these could be based on need and some could be based on some special talent the student has. Check with the college or university. Are there any additional forms that we need to complete to be considered for that institutional aid? So, remember that priority application date that I mentioned for the FAFSA? Sometimes colleges have a scholarship application and maybe it's due on that priority application date, or maybe it's due before that. So again, check with the college about those deadline dates and are there any additional forms that you need to complete. Usually the admissions representatives are pretty good. I think the colleges are pretty good about letting the students know about these applications. Now, private scholarships is kind of a additional thing to the financial aid application. Private scholarships is usually where a student might have to write an essay or a personal statement. Um, it could be $100, it could be $500, it could be $1,000, it could be anywhere in between and actually even more than that. It can be a little bit of work to apply for these scholarships, writing an essay or a personal statement, maybe gathering some reference letters, but it can pay off. I can't guarantee that a student will get a scholarship if they apply, but I can certainly guarantee they won't get one if they don't apply. So do take the time and effort to apply for these. Somebody's got to get them. And unfortunately, I think sometimes students might see some private scholarship applications and they might say, I saw that application. I don't think I would qualify for it. I know my friend would if they applied for it, but I wouldn't. So I'm not going to waste my time. Besides, it's only $1,000. Why waste my time? Well, if it takes 2 hours to apply for that scholarship and you get it, that's $500 an hour you just earned. And that's probably $1,000 you don't have to borrow in a student loan and then pay back 10 years later with interest. What I'm showing you now is just an example of a scholarship application, and it shows different things they might be requiring. This one obviously happens to be through Iowa Farm Bureau. This was for last year's seniors. We don't have the date updated yet for this next year, but I just wanted to show you the different things that they're looking for. Whether it's grade point average, being involved in different activities. This is for members, by the way, of the Iowa Farm Bureau. You do have to be a member. So, so again, there's scholarships out there for different things. Anybody could start a scholarship application for any reason, but students have to apply for those. And I didn't mention it. I'm going to go back to this slide. Check with your school counselor. They get lots of information about scholarships. You can go to our website. We have a scholarship database. Parents and grandparents, maybe organizations they belong to, local businesses. A lot of local businesses and organizations go through the high school counselor, but it doesn't hurt to double check just to find these scholarships. So I also want to show you another scholarship. Now this one is specific from December 4th through December 2nd for this year's, well, for anyone in high school, actually. This is through Iowa Student Loan. They call this a scholarship, but it's actually a drawing where you enter in your information, and if they draw your name, they'll put $1,000 into a college savings fund for you. If you don't have a college savings fund started, you can go ahead and start one, and they'll put that money in. Notice there's some other scholarships from January 6th to April 30th of 2025, and then there's some that are year-round. So regardless of when you're watching this recording, hopefully it kind of falls in one of those dates, and you can actually apply for $1,000, and it's a random drawing. Now, hopefully students are keeping track of the things they're involved in high school. You know, there's lots of students out there with lots of what I call good credentials, and there's actually organizations that will actually give them money based on their credentials, but they have to let them know, here's my credentials, and apply for these scholarships. The activities resume, we actually have a template on our website that students can access, and it's kind of like filling in the blanks. It'll make filling out these applications as well as admission applications much easier. So, so please be sure to keep track of all the things that you're involved in. Now, you shouldn't have to pay people to get lists of scholarships or to apply. There's lots of free information that's out there. I wouldn't give someone $5 to apply for a scholarship. I just wouldn't. $5 might not sound like much, but there's lots of free resources out there. So you shouldn't have to pay people for this type of information. So my last slide of this recording is the free places to go to for help. For you high school students, check with your school counselor. You know, excellent resources. I've worked with many, and especially in Northeast Iowa over the years. Excellent resources for the students. I know if they don't know the answers to your questions, they know who they can contact to get the answers. Don't be afraid to call the college admission or financial aid offices. Remember, when you apply for financial aid, it first goes to the Department of Education. They process it. They send you some results, but they also send those results to the college or colleges that you listed. So if you have any of those special circumstances, or you apply and you haven't heard from the college in a while, don't be afraid to contact the financial aid office. Obviously, you can give us a call at ICANN. Our toll-free number's listed. You can also send us a message through our website, and you can meet with us. You know, a lot of what we do is we meet with families to help fill out the financial aid application. However, you can also meet with us. We offer other services about college and career planning, as well as maybe just getting kind of a heads up about the financial aid process and how does that work. So it doesn't just have to be to fill out a financial aid application. So I hope you've gained some good knowledge about the financial aid application. And if you have any other questions, be sure to let us know, and we would be happy to help you out. So thank you very much.